Hey, welcome to Digital Health Off the Record, your podcast for the latest clinical technology trends, news, and where we share unfiltered insights. I'm Farrell, I'm from OptiTrial, and I've been in clinical technology game for over 13 years, working on both the sponsor and vendor sides, so I have a very broad base for my expertise. And what gets me out of bed in the morning is trying to get technology that works and drives better trials for patient sites and study teams.
And
And
I'm
over to my
Edwin.
colleague.
Yes, so I'm Edwin. I'm Dutch and I've been working in the industry a little bit longer for over 18 years. I've got a clinical operations background, and the last couple of years I've been dedicating my time and efforts into digital health. And I'm really keen on getting new innovations to sponsor sites and patients. So why we're here, Farah and I are former colleagues at AstraZeneca, and we share the same interest to drive innovation and to move things forward. And we wanted to have a forum where we can have an easy, open, informal, unfiltered discussion about the industry trends, share some knowledge and our experience, obviously, but also to learn from leaders within the industry. And for today and our first podcast, we will be discussing uh, one of the topics that is close to our heart and that has recently been in the center of a lot of communication and trends, and that is SCOPE, the Senior Leaders Conference within clinical operations. So, reflecting on this, Farrell, been there. What's your first impression of the event last week?
Yeah, so it was my first time going to the US version of it. I haven't been to the European one quite a few times in recent years. Biggest impression was just the sheer size in terms of the number of tracks, the number of people, the hotel itself was a massive campus, and as well as that, it wasn't totally overbearing because there was a lot of good energy. Everyone was excited, collaborative, some really good sessions, and yeah, people were very open to connection, and everybody was there to try and make make better upon the industry, basically. How about yourself, Edwin?
Yeah, so first impression, my first time at Scope US as well. A bit disappointing. Everyone's talking about the weather because it was freezing cold for that time of year. But nevertheless, it was definitely a great experience. More than 5,000 people attending, which was a record for Scope. So that shows also a little bit the interest within the industry and things catching up. So at some points overwhelming with so many people, but at the same time also a lot of familiar faces and really good to reconnect with former colleagues. And I think that's a bit what the conference is about as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, with that in mind, what was your big highlight, or did you have any key takeaways from any of the sessions while you were there?
So I've attended a couple of or quite a few sessions actually, because from different type of work streams, just to get an idea and a sense of what's going on within the industry. And what I honestly really liked about the kickoff and the first couple of keynotes in the big conference room was that it was all about patients and patient centricity. There was a good panel of patients explaining their experience in participating in clinical trials. And the reason why I think this is always good is that it brings us back to why we are actually doing all of this. And if I'm honest, I don't get out of bed and open my laptop every day with that in mind. It's sometimes just working with your colleagues on or a really intense project, but eventually this is what we're doing it for. And it became clear that we have, as an industry, still have a lot of work to do to make it easier for patients in clinical studies. So that's one important sort of highlight and key takeaway. Um, Also, what I sense is that the last couple of 2 years, 24 and 25, were a little bit stalling with new innovation. Last year was all about AI, not a lot of new, quote unquote, new innovation. And this year and this kickoff really feels like a new sort of beginning where a lot of traction will come into practice. And obviously, a lot of technology vendors and service providers were there. So the pharmacy industry was very well represented. But if you look at sort of the stands and the booths, those were mainly driven by the technology and vendor service partners. So that's in a nutshell a little bit my reflection and takeaway then from this scope. And yourself?
Yeah, for me, probably it started where you were mentioning about the weather. So, when a bunch of us were flying in from London, we were almost in Orlando. Then we got a communication from the flight deck saying that the control tower was out of action, which initially it was there was a fire, but then it turned out later that the cold weather had frozen or interfered with some of the sprinkler systems. So that put a bit of a delay on things, and eventually we got sent to Tampa, which was interesting in itself. It seemed that there was not much similar to clinical trials. They didn't know what to do, what the mitigation when they needed to be in firefighter mode. Eventually, we were just sitting around waiting for information, which is probably what a lot of sites and study teams feel a lot of the time. But it was really good experience as well because while we were waiting, a bunch of us on the plane were just chatting, found out there were a lot of people that were going to scope as well. Eventually, after an hour delay of getting the bags off, which clearly took a lot of time to get some ground staff ready to help us out, but a few familiar faces were available, and we all shared a taxi to get there. So yeah, and that theme carried on through the conference. It just showed what a big yet small industry that it is, that there were so many familiar faces in this massive 5,000 person crowd, from former colleagues to people that I connected with in different industry groups. Lots of people that felt familiar amongst the masses. And then the other big kind of takeaway that I noted is going into the exhibition hall. There's so many new players out there in the tech market now. There's names that never heard of before that were all new up and comers. And there's just so many options available. So it can be quite daunting for study teams and sponsors to know who do they go with, who's the right fit for what their study needs are. And as well, during some of the sessions, there were lots of solutions mentioned, and quite a few topics of AI were popping up, like you said. But many of the solutions were mentioned, and it didn't really go into as much detail on what were the required standards or anything you needed practically or to operationalize having any of these solutions in place. So it kind of took the path of here's a solution, but not really what's the runway to take off with those new technologies
Yeah,
that are available.
good reflection. I think I can echo that. And also love to hear you sort of change your quote unquote bad experience into a positive thing and a positive takeaway from scope. And yeah, definitely it's a community for sure. And even though we work globally, you're based in London, Irish though. I'm here in the Netherlands, but yeah, the world is relatively small from that perspective. So always good to see. But if we look at sort of if you want to pick out a key trend that resonated throughout the 4 days of scope, what stand out?
So aside from clearly ChatGPT or any other LLM have been very helpful in creating some of the session topic naming. I think the biggest trend amongst all of the agenda items were agentic AI. Definitely was the new buzzword, definitely the new hot topic of the hype cycle. And there were lots of sessions that were talking about how companies were using it or trying to sell the service, and it still wasn't totally clear that whether they were just, saying it because they felt they had to because it's the
Mm,
new buzzword and hype, whether they were just
mm,
bragging or saying things before they had it fully
mm,
baked, because it's almost like a digital arms race now that you need to be doing AI or you're falling behind.
mhm,
So there's a lot of pressure to, yeah, get behind it and try and start saying that you do it without really giving much information on what's the actual benefit to a sponsor, to a site, to a patient, whether it's just for internal benefits or not really going into any of the regulatory details as well, because we're in
mm,
a risk averse industry. One of the biggest challenges to adopting new innovative technologies, it's not the technology itself, it's the people and the process side of things. So just because they can do the technology, are they doing it in a
mm,
GCP compliant fashion, or do they even
mm,
know, what the knock-on effect would be to a sponsor in terms of adopting such
mm.
solutions,
Yeah,
especially when it comes to the accountability or who's responsible, all the oversight and governance structures that
yeah.
are necessary to enable it.
Have
And what
you
about yourself?
seen? Yeah, well, first a question actually before I answer
Hmm.
that. So, have you seen during those either sessions or the keynotes or panel sessions that they could provide you with sort of the evidence that they are looking at a broader scale, taking all the facets into account? Have you seen any of that?
So it's a bit of a balancing act, because obviously the advancement in technology will drive products, but often just having a product doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right fit for needs.
Mhm,
So it can sometimes feel like there's a bit of a force fit sometimes, but I do think it does have legs. It's not ready for prime time because there are so many things that would need to happen to enable it. But I do think it has a lot of legs because, sites and study teams and monitors, they're being asked all the time to do more with
mm.
less or the same. So anyway, whether it's agentic AI or whether it's, something that got mislabeled as agentic AI, that's just a simple automation, for example. There are different paths that I think everybody is in the same direction, that the true business need is how to make life easier for the sites, patients, and study teams to
Yeah,
help drive studies faster and, yeah, making sure that we're getting those medications through as quick as possible for the patients that have unmet needs.
yeah, exactly. And I think we could spend a whole podcast probably working out the definition of AI and agentic AI and whether it's just purely automation of a process. I think that's probably not always well understood. I'm not considering myself to be an AI expert, but I
Well,
similar like other trends that we've seen in the industry. Yeah, we need to sort of digest a little bit further on what it actually is and what it is capable of doing. Yeah, so I definitely echo what you
well,
just said.
with the agentic AI, the difference, but what makes it agentic is that the AI agent has autonomy for decision making, which, when it comes to the GCP side of things, where you need to have clear delegation of responsibility and management and oversight, that's where some of the challenges can occur of
Yeah,
who is ultimately responsible for a particular action, which, if an
yeah,
agent makes a decision, that's some of the hurdles that we need to
yeah.
overcome.
So the ratios that we have outlined in our SOPs, we need to add an additional column
Exactly. We need
with
to
the AI
have our
agents.
agent in the loop. And
Exactly, and we are. and this is with a critical note in the industry, very good in creating the SOPs, but adhering to it is always the difficult one. So yeah, that's definitely going to be a challenge.
And how about yourself? What topics did you manage to jump in on, or what trends did you
Wow,
see
the
come
trends
through?
obviously, yeah, obviously, and I'm sorry to say, it's definitely going to be agentic AI for sure. Although, as said, it started with patient centricity. Eventually, everyone segued agentic AI into their presentations and panel discussions. Um, what I've seen, or what my reflection is, that it was mainly about optimizing internal workflows and processes, and whether that really touches upon the definition of agentic, I've got my reservations on that. But don't get me wrong, anything that simplifies and speeds up the study startup or study closure or submission, I'm all in for it. So don't get me wrong, I think that's a good thing. But it was really internally focused, more and more, and this is a topic that has been discussed like for many years: is standardizing protocols, document management. But now we live in an era where actually the protocols can be auto created based on good historical data. And I think this is something that we probably need to understand from the industry. Are they going to push out all their historical protocols into their database and use that as the foundation for creating new ones? Because, and the reason why I'm saying this is because we have a tendency to create a lot of protocol amendments. So the data we push in is not particularly always great.
No, and I think reusing old protocols it introduces inherent bias to your trials, so it's not going to ensure that there's, sufficient diversity. It may narrow your delivery to, the typical white male, possibly, which it's not really making sure that it's not helping with precision medicine or medicine for all, because there's definitely a lot of unmet needs, and
Yeah.
you need to be more open in the inclusion exclusion criteria to make sure that you've got the best net possible to have as diverse a patient population as you can.
Yeah, I think this is spot on. I've been worried about the bias for quite some time, and yeah, that's definitely something we can spend another podcast on, probably on all the different aspects, on maybe sort of how to avoid that for sure. The other things though that I found was interesting is a couple of topics about, it's more high level around data flow, and especially with electronic medical records, so patient records, moving that automatically into EDCs, or maybe making then parts of EDC redundant. Digital endpoints and sensors have been addressed, but were not the main topic, which I think personally is a little bit of a shame, because I think there's a lot of things to win within the industry and to do things completely different that we've done, especially the digital measurements is um, maybe not so well understood even, and with knowing the industry a little bit, being risk averse and don't want to push the timelines, and obviously we want to secure the our that we meet all our endpoints, then this is something that is still in the exploration phase. So maybe next year this could be a good other topic for scope in maybe how our agentic AI can help develop these digital endpoints much in a much better way. And yeah, last thing I would say is, and I was happy as well to hear that this, I've heard people say about, we need to really look at the data that we have. We briefly touched upon this, but we sit on a pile of data, and we know that half of it is probably not usable, and everything that we use to predict the future needs to be really good. So the industry needs to put a lot of time and efforts into looking at the data before they continue to build further on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I did some research before, and I think Tufts released some articles about or research, and I think in the past 10 years, possibly, the amount of data captured in a clinical trial it's three times the amount. So now I think it went from like 900,000 data points to about 3 million. So, and that also ties in with, another bit of research that I'd seen previously that only about 40% of data captured in a clinical trial actually gets used or seen, which it just goes back to why are you capturing it and what's the implication? Because if you're 60% of that data is redundant, and that's just added unnecessary burden to sites, patients, everybody in the whole ecosystem and workflow. And
Yeah.
that in itself is a lot of money, which at the end of the day, it could be getting cheaper drugs out there, or you could be, having an extra trial if you make a few savings here and there as well.
Well, I think a 30% reduction of data capture is going to significantly impact the cost of running clinical trials. So that should be a really good driver actually for the industry to carefully look at that.
Yeah, and I think it's that balance of having a net that tries to capture everything versus having a laser
Mm,
focus of this is what I need. There is a balance between it, but it might just
yeah,
be, at
yeah,
which phase do you decide to have your net and where to have your
yeah,
laser beam.
yeah. Yeah, on the other side though, with agentic AI and AI and the support of this, we should be able to review all the data much better now. So
Hmm.
previously it used required a lot of manpower, and maybe that was the reason why we didn't do a lot with that data. But yeah, we could also utilize it differently. But obviously, we need to see the outcome whether we consider it to be truly beneficial, and if not, then yeah, then we shouldn't be doing it.
Exactly. So, last but not least, big question. Are you planning to go to Scope again next year? So, big thing I heard was it's moving out to March because of some logistical challenges of
Not
when it
from
gets
the
moved
weather.
first.
It was
No,
February
well,
is
I
too
mean,
cold.
March definitely going to be better weather, you'd hope.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I think we are in the early start of 26, so we've got a lot of things ahead of us. I think October is going to be the next scope in Europe. Uh, so I will probably and will most likely join that one, and definitely I will go back next year. But looking forward to Scope Europe because also there the trend is that it's increasing in size. More key, well, not only keynote speakers, but more people with really nice, innovative views and opinions are attending Europe as well. And obviously, being based in Europe, I hope it will get to the same level as we have last week experienced in the US. And yeah, yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, who doesn't want to go to Florida? But hopefully next time I get to see a bit more than just the inside of the hotel. Uh,
Yeah, I can totally rely on that. Yeah, well, we will make some other preparations, if you know this, in time. So, Farrell, I think this was our first Digital Health off the Record podcast, and our next podcast, we briefly touched upon that before in our preparation, but our reflections from Scope have led to this. Is that we want to focus a little bit more on sites and the amount of different technologies that come their way. This has been one of the topics, at least for that was touched upon in Scope, and yeah, we want to further discuss this how and what we as an industry should be able to do to reduce that burden.
Absolutely. So let's have that call to action. Let's keep this conversation going. And yeah, if you were at Scope, let us know. What did you enjoy? What were the big call outs that you saw? And if you didn't, What are the other burning topics that are on your mind that you'd like to discuss or see our thoughts upon this podcast? And as well, if you'd like to be a guest, let us know. We're a friendly bunch and we're more than happy to have some like minded people come and have a little chat with us. So, to close out, that was Digital Health Off the Record. And you can find the podcast wherever you find your podcasts and keep an eye out on LinkedIn for future episodes.
Great. Great to have you on board. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye bye.